When I was a teenager, my favorite celebrities, or at least the ones that were the most popular, probably Kurt Cobain. He was a big one. Strangely, after his suicide, he became more popular. He became sort of like a hero for the grunge movement, counterculture. Michael Jordan, because he was a basketball phenom and probably the best player that ever lived.
Like, I remember like bands that we liked a lot. No Doubt and Bush and Smashing Pumpkins. I remember there was Lollapalooza and Pownell when I was when I was 15. Like Metallica was there, so that was cool. Celebrities. Friends just started to come out then. Jennifer Aniston, the hair was all over the place. I remember that.
You know, a lot of my favorite celebrities were musicians. Jimi Hendrix and all the Led Zeppelin people and the Beatles and the band called the Yardbirds, Clapton and Cream and, you know, those bands. A lot of British rock bands.
When I was a teenager, we were into watching some things on TV. Partridge Family. So David Cassidy was a big one. Brady Bunch was big. Bob Dylan and Joan Baez. And of course Beatles were all the rage. We all loved the Beatles. So I had a sister who was totally freakishly into David Cassidy. We shared a room, so one day I came into the bedroom and she had papered all the walls with pictures of David Cassidy. He wasn't one of my favorites, but he was very popular.
When I was a teenager, not only for myself, but for a lot of people in my generation, it really came down to sports and music. It hasn't changed much today, except I think that our guys were more of heroes to us, if you will, because we had limited contact with them. People can access anybody you want through the internet, videos and stuff like that. Back then it was TV and newspaper, maybe radio. Elvis was on his way out, but he was still very popular. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and others were rising. There were just too many movie stars to mention, and we all had our favorite sports teams. In my case, they're all New York teams. All right, so among them, probably the highest one is the Yankees themselves. The Rolling Stones, Elvis, even though he was on his way down, and of course the Beatles were really big during the 60s. That's where I'm from.
Michael Jordan pretty much managed to stay above a lot of the tabloid gossip. The big thing about Michael Jordan that was sort of like juicy gossip was that he had a gambling problem. And that was pretty much it.
There's definitely tabloid stuff, particularly about like things like who was hooking up with who. If you stand in the grocery line, you know, you're bored, you'd look at the headlines. But I guess the really big difference, and I think, you know, we had internet and things like that, but it wasn't as, what's the word? I mean, it wasn't as pervasive as it is now. The gossip rags got even worse because you've got internet and everybody's typing everything and lies, whatever. But so there wasn't that factor.
I read fanzines. There was a magazine called Liberator. There was a magazine called Green. So I read those publications, and they treated everybody like gods, you know, rock gods. In the news, things would happen like Jimi Hendrix, when Jimi Hendrix played the Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock, you know, some staunch World War II veterans would be very upset, thinking that he you know, did something that was sacrilegious, you know, to America. When the Rolling Stones played on the Ed Sullivan Show, and Ed Sullivan made them change the words to "Let's spend the night together" to "Let's spend the evening together." When Elvis Presley played on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they cut off his, they wouldn't show his below his waist, they wouldn't show his hips moving because he was, you know, there was a sexual sort of a connotation to that.
They didn't have it like they do now. It's terrible now. Some of those Teen Beat magazines, and those were really popular. Tiger Beat, Teen Beat, those kinds of things. They had all those pop sort of culture people in there.
Most of the time, they got great media, great coverage, and we're only accessing them through, you know, TV news, the newspapers, and magazines. It was such limited media, unlike you have today, that they were heroic, okay? You only heard the good sides. Unless they did something really, really bad. Magazines were critical. because you would get summative stuff that you get immediately with the internet, we would get a week later. You didn't have that day-to-day following them around, then instant reporting like you have today.
Michael Jordan was everywhere. He was on sneakers, he was on commercials, he was like, just his figure, his silhouette became a icon in itself. Like, you didn't even need to see his face, you just pretty much knew who it was. Kurt Cobain influenced definitely the fashion. You saw it everywhere, even if it wasn't necessarily like a name on the brand, you sort of saw like evidence of it everywhere. And just like kids paying attention to like the sneakers they were wearing had a lot to do with like Michael Jordan. Like, lots of people wore flannel. I wore flannel. Lots of people wore jeans that were like ripped, and so did I.
The 90210 phase came, and like they made books about it, and yeah, the whole like the thing that you see now.
There were albums and there were albums and T-shirts, and that was kind of it. And then the magazines. There wasn't a whole lot of other stuff. It certainly wasn't like today.
There were some Brady Bunch things, but there really were a lot of Partridge Family things, lunch boxes and things like that. That was, I think, kind of really the beginning of that sort of merchandise use.
Well, the biggest thing, especially, of course, when we talk about musicians, I think the advantage we have over you, we got records. Have you ever seen a record? You get posters, you get all this stuff on the inside, you get lyrics to the songs you can actually read. You know, there's lots of stuff there. Records, I think, are better than anything you have today. But in terms of actual merchandise outside the selling product, really it was just T-shirts. Posters were big, but they came on later when I was in my mid to late teens. You really didn't see a lot of that. So if you had to narrow it down, it would be posters, records if they were musicians, and, you know, the occasional T-shirt. There weren't a lot of sports T-shirts. The T-shirts you bought were musicians, maybe the occasional actor, but you never wore a number with a name on the back saying, "This is my team. I love this team." Okay. It just wasn't possible back. You might buy a T-shirt that said New York Yankees on it, but never a jersey.
Right.
So it was pretty limited, as you can imagine.
I didn't, but plenty of people that I knew in school did. Like, as much as I thought like the music was great, I didn't really hold it up to like probably as high as others did.
Remember, it affected, like, we were post Nirvana, but we still were, everybody revered Kurt Cobain. I was on like the tail end of the Seattle grunge thing, so I don't know if they were trying to like bring it back or whatever, but they're like a lot of flannel and dressed in like better and and things like that.
I didn't, and most of my friends didn't either. I mean, I wanted to be like them. I had my own band going from the time I was 13. So I was busy doing what I thought I had to do to get there, rather than going crazy about who they
A couple
were.
of my sisters really went crazy over the David Cassidy, Bobby Sherman thing. I was a bit of a black sheep in my family.
We would tend to model ourselves after some of those guys, you know.